Hey, this is Chris Neal, and welcome to BasementRecordStudio.com. Alright, well, this is BasementRecordStudio.com. My name is Chris Neal, and today we're going to be talking about studio setup. Now, whether you're using a commercial studio or whether you're going for a home setup, obviously the differences can be very dramatic, but we're going to go through a little bit of both of them. Now, the main thing you want to be looking at in any studio is a way to obviously record the performance that you are trying to portray. Now, what I would recommend is a computer software, and obviously a computer, and either a PC or a Mac or whatever you're using, and go from there. Now, you can use multi-track recorders like tape recorders and certain things like that. That works just fine if that's what you want to go with. If not, then you go with a PC or a Mac or something like that. Now, first thing you want to make sure you have is an interface. Now, the interface is what you would use for audio to transfer into, and then comes out as digital going into the computer. And then once it's in the computer, the software can read it. Now, once it's in the software, then you can do whatever you want with it digitally. You can move it around, crop it, like clip, anything you want to do. So after that, what you would need after a interface was obviously a software to use with it. Now, most interfaces will only work with certain softwares and vice versa. So you got to make sure that you have the right software and the right interface. Now, I would recommend probably going with Pro Tools, maybe with a DigiDesign M-Box, and then having the Pro Tools software in the M-Box, and if not Pro Tools M-Box, then I would go with Pro Tools M-Powered with the M-Audio systems. M-Box has a lot of different qualities to it right now. You get an M-Box Mini, and that will give you 2 channels of line input, and on the same first channel of line input you get a mic input, so you can do one or the other. So it's kind of limited, but if you're only looking for 2 inputs, then that's the way to go for you. If you want more like 4, then you might want a 002. If you want 8, then you probably want to go with more like a 003. And then obviously M-Audio has, for M-Powered Pro Tools, has a lot of different possibilities. They got 8 preamps for a lot of different things for very cheap. So I would recommend M-Audio almost over DigiDesign if you want to get going with full bands and stuff like that. The interface will work a lot more easier for you than obviously an M-Box Mini or even an M-Box or even a 003 possibly. So what I would recommend is go with either DigiDesign or M-Audio. There's also PreSonus and stuff like that. But if we move on from the interface, what I would like to talk about is probably the actual softwares itself. Now, Pro Tools is a very good software. It records great. I think that it records the best interpretation that out of all of the softwares. So you want the exact thing that you heard that you were recording, then that's what you're gonna get. So I'd go with Pro Tools. So if you want maybe to go with Logic, or let's say Sonar, which is also Cakewalk, which is a different version of it, Cubase, all sorts of softwares like that, then it's totally fine. Go with whatever you feel, and then just know the differences between the softwares, what you get out of it, what you don't get out of it, and vice versa. And after that, then just keep moving on from there. So one thing I would like to talk about is if you don't want to use an interface and you don't need to use an interface, the only way you probably wouldn't need to use one is either if you have a software that lets you go in your mic jack input, and that would be okay quality. And a lot of people I've seen done that. I've done it at one point in my life, and most of my fellow engineers that I know have done it. And so that's a very good way to go if you are very, very rough on money. You want to spend only like $30 on a software. Go to Best Buy, get Cakewalk, and mic it up to your jack. Go from there and keep going. So after that, I would recommend using, if you're only going to be using MIDI, like you're going to be doing software kind of stuff, you're going to be doing synths, drum patches, stuff like that. Keep going with, don't even have to worry about interface, and just get a keyboard like I have right here and go with that. And all you need to do is have software that actually has those synths inside of it, because what MIDI is just data that travels into the computer, and then the software actually creates the sound. So yeah, you can literally just mic up either USB or MIDI into your computer and do it like that. I would recommend that for anybody who's not going to be doing any actual audio recordings. So after that, what I would recommend is, you need a certain amount of RAM and a certain amount of processing. Now, they say, most of the companies say that, 1 gig of each is pretty good, enough and everything. But I would recommend at least 2 for each, because 1 is like scraping by. You're going to end up having your computer bogged down every once in a while when you don't think it should. And then 2 is better, and then 3, 4, on and on. You more you get, the better you feel, and the better it works. So going into the actual specifications of softwares and then the interfaces that you can use with them. Going with Pro Tools, you get a lot of different editing kind of styles. You get a lot of functionality. It's very easy to work with, and it may seem complicated if you're untrained, but to a trained person, or even to someone who would just learn that in comparison to something else, they would probably learn Pro Tools a lot easier than they would learn Logic, than they would learn Cakewalk, anything like that. It's kind of funny that these simple softwares are supposed to be so simple, but it seems to be more confusing than what they would call more complex, like Pro Tools situation. So Pro Tools, I would go with that. If you want kind of like a more of a, I get kind of a warmer sound out of Logic. I get kind of a different kind of tone to it, and I would go with Logic if you kind of want that kind of thing. If you want an exact representation, you go with Pro Tools. You want to edit it really well, you go with Pro Tools. You want to get a really nice mix, you go Logic. What I do is I start on Pro Tools, edit it, and then after I edit it in Pro Tools, then I switch it over and mix it in Logic. And Logic works great for a lot of different things in the mixing situations, so I like that a lot. I also do a little bit of mastering in Logic, not much, but a little bit in there. And then softwares like Sonar work very well for, it's usually a lot cheaper, especially if you go with the Cakewalk version of Sonar. It's like $30 at Best Buy, and it still gives you a lot of functionality and a lot of quality for how very cheap it is in comparison to Pro Tools, which is, you get an MBox Mini, it's like $250, $300 for one of the smallest versions of an interface that you can get. And then the Pro Tools, all the Pro Tools are all the same, except for there's Pro Tools HD, which is a whole nother different world. And then there's Pro Tools LE and M-Powered. So LE works with the M boxes and stuff like that. M-Powered works with the M audio equipment, like the interfaces and all that. So, so that is pretty much the basics for getting you a home studio setup. Other than having maybe like a couple of microphones, I would recommend a condenser microphone if you're going to be singing or possibly rapping as well. It depends on how far you want to go with spending money. A couple MXL microphones work great for how cheap they are. You can get a decent MXL for anywhere from $100 to $500, and they work really well actually for how cheap they are. They're definitely doing a good job with that. So I would also recommend going up, if you're going to spend a lot more money on it, you go up towards the Neumanns and stuff like that, and Sennheiser and AKG, stuff like that. Like if you're gonna go with an AKG, I'd go with a 414, tell you the truth, even with vocals. I've done that a few times and it sounds pretty good. So moving on from there, if you want to talk about going more into the commercial side of things, then you're looking at using Pro Tools HD and all these other HD kind of products for softwares and everything. And those are like the big guys, the ones that everybody's oohing and on and everything, in all the fancy studios, with 40 channel racks and all that kind of stuff like that. So basic things that you would need there are everything that I said, except usually it's expanded out. If you have an interface, which you will, you are going to want probably at least 8 inputs and outputs, at least, most likely 16 at least of both, and at least 8 to 16 preamps of some sort, because you're going to be dealing with drums, you're going to be dealing with more than one guitar, you're going to be dealing with more than one singer, keyboardist, stuff like that. So you move on from there, and you pretty much work your way up, and obviously it costs you a heck of a lot more money. You usually have a lot more things like compressors and more preamps and stuff like that. And one thing I didn't mention before, you should probably have a preamp in either a home studio or a commercial studio, and that would be you can go from anything from having like a cheaper PreSonus has some decent ones, for just a cheaper buy to get going, and then you go into more expensive things like Great Rivers and Avalons and those kinds of brands, and those guys are definitely making things sound pretty good for the preamp world. So then you have preamps, which I would recommend having, and then I would recommend also having compressors and EQs, mostly outboard gear. And if you're not going to go with outboard gear, then you gotta have some sort of plugins or something like that, because if you're literally just going with setting levels and you're not EQing, you're not compressing, you're not doing anything like that, you're most likely not going to get much out of your mix, because you're not going to be able to take it to its full potential. It's going to either sound really muddy, or it's going to sound really thin, or it's not going to sound crisp, it's not going to sound clear. You want it to sound very good, and you want it to have a nice very, very nice color to it and everything. And that's what happens when you use preamps that are really good, when you use compressors that are good, EQs that are good, and so on. So that's pretty much what I have for you today. And if you guys have any comments or anything, let me know. And if you have any questions, please let me know, because I'll be happy to help you out with the info. All right? You guys take it easy.